My name is Ava, and I'm 22 years old. To anyone looking at my life from the outside, it might seem ordinary. A young woman in her early 20s, attending college, working on freelance projects, and sketching her way through the day. But there's more to the story, and it starts with the question that seems to linger in everyone's mind. How did I end up living with my uncle? It wasn't part of some grand life plan. Truthfully, my journey here is one I never anticipated. I'm a graphic design student, pouring my energy into coursework and freelance gigs. For as long as I can remember, creativity has been my anchor. It's where I find solace and control, especially during moments when life feels unpredictable, as it so often has. You see, my parents divorced when I was 14. It's a strange age to face such upheaval, not a child anymore, but not quite equipped to handle adult-sized emotions. Their separation sent shockwaves through my life. It wasn't just about who got custody or where I'd live. It was the disintegration of the only foundation I'd ever known. My mom tried her best, but financial pressures and the demands of single parenthood left us constantly moving. Stability became a fleeting concept, something I longed for but rarely experienced. By the time I turned 20, my mom had to take a job overseas, a decision born out of necessity, not choice. I needed to stay in the US to finish college, but I had nowhere to go. That's when my uncle Nathan stepped in. He and his wife, Victoria, opened their home to me. It wasn't ideal, at least not to me at the time, but it was my only option. Nathan and Victoria live in a house that could have been pulled straight from a painting. Nestled in the countryside, it boasts rolling green hills, a winding gravel driveway, and mornings so quiet you can hear the dew settling on the grass. For a city girl like me, the contrast was jarring. Gone were the sounds of car horns, chatter, and the ever-present hum of urban life. In their place, I found silence, both comforting and unnerving. When I first moved in, I saw it as a temporary solution. I told myself it was just a pit stop on the way to something better, a stepping stone until I could afford my own apartment. But as the weeks turned into months, I realized that life had other plans for me. My uncle's home wasn't just a refuge from the chaos of my past. It was a place where I'd be forced to confront truths about myself and what I wanted from life. Looking back, it's clear that this was more than just a move. It was the beginning of a chapter one never saw coming, one filled with challenges, unexpected connections, and a deeper understanding of what it means to call a place and people home. Nathan wasn't just my uncle. He was a cornerstone in my life. A mentor who taught me lessons both practical and profound, a guide who steadied me when life felt like it was spiraling out of control, and one of the few constants I could always count on. My childhood memories were filled with moments shaped by him, learning to ride a bike under his patient guidance, afternoons spent fixing leaky faucets and broken chairs, and the overwhelming excitement when he surprised me with my first car on my 18th birthday. Nathan wasn't just a relative. He was family in the deepest sense, someone who gave me the foundation I needed to stand on my own 2 feet. But this time, moving in with Nathan meant stepping into a different world. It wasn't just him I'd be living with. His wife, Victoria, had been part of his life for a few years now, and she brought a dynamic to the household that I had yet to fully understand. Victoria was everything Nathan wasn't. Elegant where he was casual, composed where he was easygoing. She had this quiet authority about her that could make anyone second-guess themselves, including me. Though she was always polite, there was a distance in her demeanor, like she'd built walls around herself that no one was meant to cross. At first, I felt like a visitor in their home, a guest whose stay had an expiration date. My room was at the far end of the house, offering both privacy and a sense of isolation. Victoria's efforts to engage me were minimal but courteous. She'd offer tips on cooking or household tasks in her calm, almost clinical way, but our conversations rarely ventured beyond the surface. For her, it seemed I was an addition to her carefully organized life, an unplanned one she was still figuring out how to accommodate. Gradually, the tension between us began to soften, like ice melting under a weak sun. While we never became close, we settled into a rhythm of mutual respect. I learned to appreciate her structure and precision, and she seemed to grow accustomed to my more spontaneous approach to things. Life in the countryside began to take on a steady pace, its quiet routines soothing in their simplicity. The chirping of crickets at night, the rustle of leaves in the morning breeze, and the absence of the city's relentless noise felt like a balm to my overstimulated mind. Yet, even as I adjusted, a sense of unease lingered beneath the surface. Maybe it was the isolation of the countryside or the unfamiliar dynamics of Nathan and Victoria's household. Whatever it was, it quietly simmered unnoticed, until the day it came to a boil. It began on one of those slow afternoons when time seemed to stretch endlessly. Nathan was taking his usual nap in his room, and Victoria had gone out for the day, leaving me alone in the house. I had been working on a design project at the kitchen table, the kind of task that made hours slip by unnoticed. The peace was almost hypnotic until a sound from the hallway jolted me out of my focus. At first, I dismissed it as the old house settling, a creak, a groan, the kind of noise you stop noticing after a while. But then it came again, clearer this time, and my curiosity stirred. I set my work aside and walked cautiously toward the sound. The hallway was dimly lit, shadows pooling in the corners where the light from the windows didn't quite reach. The air felt heavier somehow, as though the house was holding its breath. My footsteps on the floorboards were louder than I expected, each creak amplifying my apprehension. I paused outside Nathan's door, my hand hovering just above the doorknob. I told myself it was nothing, just my imagination running wild. But something inside me wouldn't let it go. My heart pounded in my chest, and I stood there, frozen in that moment of indecision, unsure of whether to knock, to enter, or to walk away. Whatever lay beyond that door felt like it was waiting for me to make the first move. And so, with my pulse racing and my breath shallow, I slowly turned the doorknob and stepped inside. What I found would change everything. This expanded version adds more depth to the characters and their relationships, fleshing out the tension and atmosphere of the story. The emotional weight of Nathan's mentorship, the subtle friction with Victoria, and the eerie setting of the countryside build anticipation for the mysterious moment that follows. Let me know if you'd like further refinements. Quietly, I pushed the door open. The room was bathed in the golden hues of late afternoon sunlight, its warmth softening the sharp edges of the furniture. Nathan lay on his bed, one arm tucked casually behind his head. His face was serene, framed by the halo of light streaming in through the window. For a moment, time seemed to stop. I stood frozen in the doorway, my pulse quickening inexplicably. Why did this sight stir something in me, a feeling both foreign and undeniable? I told myself it was nothing, that I was overthinking, but no rationalization could stop the thrum in my chest. Before I could retreat, my clumsy foot bumped into a vase perched precariously near his bed. It toppled over, the crash of ceramic against hardwood shattering the silence. My breath caught as Nathan stirred, his eyelids fluttering open. His gaze met mine, half-lidded and hazy with sleep. "Ava," he murmured, his voice low and rasping in a way that sent an involuntary shiver down my spine. "What are you doing here?" Heat surged to my cheeks, and I scrambled to find words. I didn't mean to wake you," I stammered, my voice barely above a whisper. "I was just checking on you." Nathan blinked a few times, then sat up, a small smile curving his lips. "It's fine," he said gently, his tone devoid of irritation. "You can always talk to me, you know. I'm here." There was something in his words, in the quiet sincerity of his tone, that made my chest ache. His smile, so disarming, so kind, lingered in the air between us. But this time, it carried a weight I couldn't ignore. The atmosphere shifted, charged with an unspoken tension I couldn't name, but felt in every fiber of my being. Days turned into weeks, but the undercurrent between us didn't fade. If anything, it deepened. I found myself noticing things I never had before. The way Nathan's eyes followed me when he thought I wasn't aware, the way his laughter sounded richer when I was around, the subtle brush of his hand against mine that lingered longer than it should have. I told myself I was imagining things, that my mind was playing tricks on me. Yet, no matter how much I tried to dismiss it, the connection between us refused to be ignored. I couldn't deny it, nor could I escape it. It was in the quiet moments when we passed each other in the hallway, a flicker of something unspoken crackling in the air. It was in the way his voice softened when he said my name, like it held a meaning only we understood. And it was in my own heart, beating faster every time I caught him looking at me with an intensity that left me breathless. One evening, the weight of it all became too much to bear. I had retreated to my room after dinner, seeking solace in the familiar rhythm of work. The pages of my notebook were filled with half-hearted scribbles, my thoughts a tangle of confusion and longing. Then I heard it. Footsteps in the hallway, deliberate and measured. Nathan. A soft knock followed. Ava. His voice, though quiet, carried an urgency that made my heart lurch. Can we talk? I hesitated, my fingers gripping the pen tightly. Sure, I replied, forcing my voice to remain steady. Rising from my chair, I opened the door to find him standing there, his expression guarded, yet vulnerable. Come with me, he said simply, stepping aside so I could follow him. We ended up in the living room, the dim light from the table lamp casting a warm glow over the space. Nathan sat on the couch, running a hand through his tousled hair before gesturing for me to sit beside him. I lowered myself onto the cushion, my pulse thrumming in my ears. He exhaled deeply, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. Ava, he began, his voice heavier than I'd ever heard it. I don't know how to say this, but there's something we need to address. I didn't speak, afraid that my voice would betray the storm inside me. I watched him as he struggled to find the words, his brow furrowing in thought. It's just, he continued, trailing off before meeting my gaze. His eyes were searching, vulnerable. There's this tension between us. And I know you feel it too. My breath caught. The words I had tried to bury suddenly laid bare. I opened my mouth to respond, but nothing came out. The weight of his confession hung in the air, thick and undeniable. I can't pretend it's not there anymore, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. And I don't think you can either. The world seemed to shrink until it was just the two of us, suspended in this moment. The truth we had avoided for so long now stood between us, demanding to be acknowledged. And in that silence, as his words echoed in my mind, I realized that everything was about to change. I swallowed hard, my hands clasped tightly in my lap, knuckles white from the tension. The words lingered in the air, unspoken yet undeniable. What do you mean? I asked, though the answer already churned within me, a storm I couldn't ignore. Nathan's gaze locked onto mine, his blue eyes filled with a mix of vulnerability and determination that made my chest tighten. I think you know, he said softly, his voice barely above a whisper. There's something between us, and I don't know how to make sense of it. Hearing him say it aloud sent a jolt through me, as if the walls around us were suddenly closing in. The silence grew heavy, a thick shroud that wrapped around us, making it hard to breathe. My mind spiraled with a chaotic tangle of emotions, guilt, confusion, and a yearning so raw it scared me. Nathan, I whispered, my voice trembling. I don't know what's happening, but I can't stop thinking about it either. The admission hung between us, a fragile truth that neither of us could deny. Slowly, as if testing the limits of something fragile, Nathan reached out. His hand brushed against mine, a fleeting touch that sent electricity coursing through me. Ava, he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. This is wrong. We both know that. But it doesn't change how I feel. Before I could respond, the sound of the front door creaking open shattered the moment. Victoria's voice rang out from the hallway, cheerful and unaware. Panic surged through me like a tidal wave, and Nathan's hand recoiled, the warmth of his touch replaced by a cold void. His expression mirrored mine, guilt, fear, and something deeper, something unspoken. Victoria appeared in the doorway moments later, her eyes darting between us. Her smile faltered, her intuition clearly picking up on the tension. Is everything okay? she asked cautiously, her tone light, but her gaze probing. I forced a smile, the weight of the moment pressing down on me. Yeah, I replied, my voice a little too high-pitched. We were just going over some project details. Her eyes lingered for a second longer than necessary before she nodded and walked away, her footsteps echoing down the hall. The silence she left behind was deafening. That night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the events replayed in my mind like a film I couldn't shut off. The tension, the unspoken feelings, the moment that had teetered on the edge of something irreversible. I knew this couldn't continue. We were balancing on a knife's edge, and one misstep could destroy everything. Days stretched into a tense, unbearable rhythm. Nathan and I avoided each other as much as possible, speaking only when necessary and keeping our interactions painfully polite. But the distance did nothing to quell the storm inside me. It only made the longing more acute, the guilt sharper. Finally, one evening as the sun dipped low on the horizon, I found him sitting on the porch. The fading light bathed him in hues of gold and orange, softening the lines of worry etched into his face. He stared out at the horizon, lost in thought, a quiet silhouette against the twilight. I hesitated, my feet rooted to the ground, before gathering the courage to approach him. The cool evening air wrapped around us as I sank into the chair beside him. For a long moment, neither of us spoke, the world around us holding its breath. Nathan, I began softly, my voice barely audible over the rustling leaves. We need to talk. He turned to me, his expression weary, as though the weight of the past days had drained him. I know, he said quietly, his voice tinged with resignation. But I don't know where to start. The silence stretched on, heavy and fraught. Finally, I took a deep breath and broke it. I'm scared, Nathan. Scared of what this means, of what happens next. I don't want to hurt anyone, but I can't pretend this isn't real. His hand found mine, warm and steady. Ava, he said, his voice firm yet gentle. You're not alone in this. Whatever we're feeling, whatever this is, we'll figure it out. Together. His words were a balm to my frayed nerves, a flicker of hope amidst the turmoil. But they didn't erase the uncertainty that loomed ahead, the countless unanswered questions that hung over us like storm clouds. We sat there in silence, the stars beginning to the inky sky above us. The world seemed to pause, holding its breath as we lingered in that fragile moment. Whatever lay ahead, I knew it wouldn't be easy. The path we were on was riddled with complexities and consequences that neither of us could fully predict. But for now, sitting side by side in the quiet embrace of the night, I allowed myself to believe that we could face it, together. One step at a time.